Hey everyone, and welcome. If you've ever looked at the retail industry and just wondered how to tell the real winners from the companies that are just getting by, well, you've come to the right place. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the key numbers, the key metrics that investors use to size up retail businesses. We're going to turn all that complex analysis into a really clear, simple toolkit you can actually use. So let's dive in.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big picture, the fundamental puzzle every single retailer is trying to solve. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty, breaking down how they track customer habits, their operational size, and of course, their financial health. And finally, we'll put it all together, see how it works in the real world by comparing some companies, and then we'll wrap up with the key takeaways you'll want to remember.
All right, first up, the retailer's core puzzle. Before we even think about touching a spreadsheet or looking at a single number, we have to understand the fundamental challenge that every retail business faces. You see, success isn't just about moving product off a shelf. It's about getting inside the customer's head and understanding how and why they buy. And trust me, sometimes those reasons are pretty surprising. So there's this kind of legendary story in the retail world that really shows the power of data. The story goes that analysts at a store found this really bizarre pattern in their sales data. Every Friday night, sales of two things spiked together: beer and diapers. I mean, what's the connection, right? Well, turns out dads who were sent out on a Friday to grab diapers for the weekend were also grabbing a six-pack for themselves. It's a simple, kind of funny insight, but it perfectly illustrates how powerful data can be for revealing what your customers are really doing. And that brings us to our first huge concept.
This right here is one of the most foundational ideas in retail analysis. I mean, how can you possibly compare a giant, sprawling hypermarket to a tiny little boutique shop? It feels impossible, right? Well, the answer is per square foot analysis. You got to think of this as the great equalizer. By measuring everything, sales, profit, you name it, relative to the physical space a store takes up, you can finally make fair, apples-to-apples comparisons. It lets you judge true efficiency, no matter how big the store is or what it sells.
Okay, so now let's get into our first batch of what we call key performance indicators, or KPIs. These are all about decoding customer behavior, basically tracking the journey from the second someone walks through the door to the moment they pull out their wallet.
First up, we have average daily footfall. And it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. On average, how many people are physically walking into a store each day? The easiest way to think about it is like a website's daily visitors. It's the most basic fundamental measure of a brand's popularity and its ability to just get people interested enough to come inside. But getting people in the door is only step one. The next question is, did they actually buy anything? That's what the average conversion rate tells us. Think about it. A grocery store is going to have a super high conversion rate, right? You go in for milk, you're probably going to leave with milk. But an apparel store? That's a different story. You might wander into 5 different clothing stores before you actually find a shirt you want to buy. So this number is all about how good a store is at turning a browser into a buyer.
And the math on this is super simple. If 1,000 people walk into your store in a day and 750 of them actually make a purchase, your conversion rate is 75%. It's a really straightforward but incredibly powerful piece of information.
Okay, so they bought something, but how much did they actually spend? That's where the average bill value, or ABV, comes in. You just take your total sales over a period and divide it by the total number of bills or transactions. This is important because a store could have a fantastic conversion rate. Almost everyone buys something. But if the ABV is super low, it might just mean they're selling a ton of cheap items or that their customers are only buying the bare minimum.
Now, as an investor, this is a really critical insight. You don't want to just look at a company's ABV in a vacuum. You want to compare its growth to the country's overall GDP growth. See, if the ABV is just growing at the same pace as the economy, that's fine, it's average. But if that ABV is growing faster than the economy, whoa, that is a massive signal that the retailer strategy is really working and that they might have some serious pricing power.
All right, so we've got a handle on the customer. Now let's kind of zoom out and look at the business itself. We're talking about its physical footprint, the range of products it sells, and probably most importantly, how it actually grows.
This brings us to a term you'll hear all the time: SKUs, which stands for stock keeping units. Basically, every single unique item in a store has its own SKU. This helps us understand an inventory's width and its depth. So, width is the variety of different products, like they sell shampoo and soap and furniture. Depth, on the other hand, is all the options for just one of those products. For example, a store might sell 10 different brands of shampoo. Each brand has 5 different types in 5 different bottle sizes. You multiply all that out, and you've got 250 unique shampoo SKUs right there. Now, the number of stores a company has is obviously a key metric, but what's even more important for an investor is the strategy behind that number. Think about the difference between a retailer like D-Mart, which focuses on opening stores in these dense local clusters, versus a brand like Starbucks, which might go after major city centers first. The type of product and the target customer completely shape the whole expansion strategy.
Okay, pay attention because this is probably one of the single most important metrics for any retail investor. It's called same-store sales growth, or SSSG. What this does is it filters out any growth that's just coming from opening brand new stores. So why is that a big deal? Well, a company can easily hide a struggling business by just opening more and more locations. The overall sales number might go up, but the existing stores could be failing. SSG tells you if the core existing stores are actually healthy and growing on their own. It's the ultimate health check for a retailer.
All right, let's get to the good stuff. It's time to connect all of this to the bottom line. We've looked at customers, we've looked at operations, now let's measure how efficiently a retailer can turn all that physical space into cold, hard profit.
And this is the metric that really ties it all together: revenue per square foot. It's simple. You take the company's total revenue and you divide it by its total retail space. This is the ultimate report card for how productively a retailer is using its physical assets. And in today's world, it's probably a good idea to include warehouse space in that square footage calculation too, since so much business happens online.
But revenue, that's just the top line. We need to look at profitability. And here, we actually look at two key metrics on a per square foot basis. First is net profit, which is the final bottom line end of story number. But we also look at EBITDA. That stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's a bit of a mouthful, but what it does is give us a much clearer picture of the core operational profitability by stripping out things like financing choices and accounting rules.
So why on earth do we need both? Well, imagine you have two retailers. Company A owns all of its stores. It's going to have really high depreciation costs, which is a non-cash expense that's going to drag down its net profit. Now, Company B rents all of its stores. It'll have really high rent expenses, which is a cash expense that's going to drag down its EBITDA. By looking at both of these numbers, you can get a much fairer, much more accurate comparison of the underlying operational health of two companies with very different business models.
And finally, we need to talk about how quickly a company is moving its product. That's called inventory turnover. It basically tells you how many times a company sells through its entire inventory in a certain period, like a year. Generally, a higher number is better. It means stuff isn't just sitting on the shelves collecting dust. And here's a little pro tip. It's often better to calculate this using the cost of goods sold instead of total sales, because that removes the distortion of profit margins and gives you a truer picture.
We have officially built our analyst toolkit, so now for the fun part. Let's take these KPIs we've learned and actually apply them to see how different kinds of retailers stack up in the real world.
Okay, check this out. This is where the story really comes together. You look at a grocery business like D-Mart, and it makes perfect sense. They have an incredibly high inventory turnover because they're selling fresh food that has to move fast. Now, compare that to Titan, which sells high-end jewelry. Their revenue per square foot is massive because the items are so expensive, but their inventory turnover is super low because, well, people don't buy a diamond necklace every week. This just goes to show why it is so important to only compare retailers to their direct competitors.
Wow, okay, we have covered a ton of ground. So let's just take a breath and boil it all down to the most essential things you, as an investor, need to have on your checklist when you're looking at any retail company.
So to wrap it all up, here is your roadmap for a much smarter analysis. 1. Always start with per square foot metrics. It's your foundation. 2. Dig into the customer behavior, footfall, conversion, and ABV to see how they're connecting with shoppers. 3. Really question where the growth is coming from. Is it just new stores, or is it healthy same-store sales growth? 4. Use EBITDA to get that clean apples-to-apples comparison of operational health. And finally, number 5, always remember to only compare inventory turnover between similar kinds of businesses.
And there you have it. We've just unpacked the entire analyst's toolkit for the retail sector, from how many people walk in the door all the way to financial efficiency. The power is really in your hands now, to look past the hype and truly understand what makes a retail business tick. So that just leaves one question. Now that you've got the tools, which retail KPI are you going to look at first?